Hi, good afternoon. We have the easy topic today of talking more about digital transformation. We're going to keep that flywheel of digital transformation going. And we have four distinguished panelists. I'd like to invite them up on stage one by one, and then they can introduce themselves. First off, Elton D'Souza, Chief Revenue Officer from TAP. Next, I'd like to introduce Tomi, and excuse my mispronunciation, Tomi, Maaniemi, former head of digitalization e-commerce at Finnair, and currently vice president at Travelaer. Thank you, Tomi. And next, we have Aaron Hynes. Please join us, Aaron. He's the managing partner at Hynes and Khater. And our last panelist is Edgar Gomes, who is Senior Vice President of Systems and Processes at Aeromexico. So to kick this off, why don't you briefly introduce yourselves, and we can talk a little bit more about digital transformation.
Okay. Hi, I'm Elton D'Souza. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at TAP, Portugal. I had, before that, I was head of network revenue management, and recently I got added on distribution, and I also got alliances and joint ventures.
Elton and I have had the pleasure of working at multiple airlines, Swiss, Austrian, we go way back.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, so hi, it's Tomi Maaniemi. You did it quite well.
Thank you.
Nowadays working for Travelaer, for you guys, for airlines. So I'm a sales guy nowadays. But just a month ago, I was working for Finnair and pretty much doing a lot of digital stuff there, leading also the e-commerce team and doing global sales. And before that, about 10 years automation at Honeywell.
Aaron Hynes with Hynes and Khater, IT consulting and software development focused on integration of various platforms in travel and other industries. Prior to that, I had 18 years at Connell and United Airlines, primarily in IT around commercial systems from e-commerce to revenue management, sales, distribution, contact centers, and everything in between.
Hello, I'm Edgar Gomes. I've been working with Aeromexico for the last over 3 years. Senior VP for revenue management, distribution, and systems. I also got distribution very recently. And before that, I worked for 7 years at Qatar Airways, and I've been in the industry for 32 years.
So what we're going to talk about today is really about modern commerce. It seems like we have these transformational moments in the airline industry. We had O&D revenue management in the early 2000s, and now we have a seismic shift in a way of how passengers buy products, what products are offered by the airlines to the customers, and how the transaction actually happens. So I guess to first start off with that, if we could talk a little bit about e-commerce and distribution and how that's changing in your airline world. Dieter brought up offer optimization, packaging together of things beyond just the seat. How are you looking at this, and how important is this in what you see in the airline world?
So I think it's a very important time, and actually it's a very exciting time. We were launch customers of O&D at Swiss with you guys, and it was when we introduced O&D, I think a lot of things didn't go right in the beginning, and I remember that we sat together and worked out a lot of processes and shared them with you as well, which you could use for your other customers. My perspective is I have seen a lot of information about tools, etc., but I've never seen a strategy yet, right? So I think it's an exciting time with a lot of change, a lot of technology changes, but I would like to, and that's what we're doing at the moment, besides the e-commerce initiatives. We've done branded fairs, we have seen very good results from branded fairs because they're very good, very well displayable on our e-commerce websites. And I think we need to get a clear strategy of where we want to go and what we want to do. And it might not be the exact right thing where we finally go to, but I think it's a good way, as Dieter said, to make a start.
Got it.
So in Aeromexico, I would say 3 years ago, we started investing a lot on the way we present ourselves in the direct channel. So basically, revamping the website. I think most of the airlines here have been in this path, right? But I think the landscape of distribution it's not only that, it's more complex today, right? And we need to think about how the technology is changed and how it's gonna change in the future. So I'll just tell you a small story. I was in a shopping mall, and then I was looking at this kid who was trying to interact with the shopping directory, right? So the most of the shopping directly is you can interact, right? Unfortunately, this one wasn't. So it was just a fixed display, right? And the kid couldn't understand why it was not interacting, because she was trying to swipe, right? And it was a 4-year-old. So this is the customer of the future that maybe for them, the website we have today doesn't make sense. Because today some of us are annoyed because I go to a website, then I go to my Facebook account, then when I get to my email, there is an offer to that destination that I was searching on. But maybe that kid in the future would not be annoyed. She would be expecting this kind of behavior. So I think we need to think about more. I know there are many things that we need to work on and resolve in terms of technology on the short term, but how are we going to be in 10, 15 years from now? You know, when this customer, which is this kid, was trying to swipe, what the future are we preparing for this customer?
Yeah, you saw my son.
You saw your son.
He's doing that, and it's definitely good that you pointed out, because the user experience here is the one thing that I haven't heard enough today. I hope that in the presentations tomorrow, we will hear more about the digital user experience, but also how you blend the physical and the digital together, because that is the future. That is what you were talking about here.
Just add a little different perspective on it. This is the first time I can recall where the industry has started to look at e-commerce and distribution holistically, right? Prior, it was always sort of sales and traditional channels versus e-commerce. And now the technology is actually in place to remove that as sort of a built-in excuse why you can't see the art of the possible, right? Now those barriers are starting to drop away, and now organizations and customers, quite frankly, are demanding that there's no excuses anymore. Get it together, figure it out, and make this a cohesive experience so I can deliver across e-commerce via the website, even to the call center, right? These things are not disjointed things anymore. You need to start to tie those things together.
Right. Well, I guess there's another implication that we've seen from talking to various airlines in the world. Airlines traditionally have silos. They're fragmented organizationally. And very often, revenue-wise, the seat revenue is separate from ancillary revenues in the organization, et cetera. And it's not managed holistically. And Dieter brought up how Etihad's looking at the organization and thinking about that. Is that have you faced issues like that, and are those issues you're addressing?
So first of all, we managed to keep the ancillaries in the revenue management and pricing team. So as you said, it works very well. It also brings speed to market if you want to change something. And I think the whole customer experience is a company problem or a company issue or a company opportunity rather than a department one. And so I believe the whole company, as also Dieter showed, has to work together. So, and my perspective is a customer experience does not only talk about selling or personalizing or whatever, but it also talks about the the experience the customer has at the airport and the customer service recovery and things like that are all included in it. So I think you can't stop at the sales and the personalizations, etc., but you have to look at it across the whole customer experience. And therefore, my opinion is that it's not only a marketing or a sales, not only a marketing and sales problem, but it's a opportunity across the whole company.
Yeah, there shouldn't be any excuses anymore, at least to create those visions and strategies. Digital is the enabler, and the technology is there. It is now the question that how long contracts you've made with the current vendors you have, and how can you get rid of those or bypass them. That's at least one way to look at it. But definitely the user experience should be the key here. The customer is the key here, and digital is the enabler.
Exactly. With this new role that I have in distribution, is one of my tasks is to work on that organization. I mean, because as you know, as you said, you have the pricing, you have the strategy and revenue management, tactical as well, then you have ancillaries. So they all need to be aligned and coordinated in terms of strategy if you're gonna have an offer management. That makes totally sense, right? So why, if it's split, everyone is doing, can you just imagine the opportunities that we're losing of coordinating just one answer to the customer?
So over 50% of travelers, now business travelers, are millennials. That came out recently. And they have a different expectation. They expect an Amazon-like buying experience. They like to be known what their preferences are, et cetera. But I mean, we've seen that very much so. Airlines are very early in personalizing offers. What we talk about at Pros is if you go to an app, every time they try to sell me miles, I haven't bought 1 mile in 25 years. But that's the first thing it tries to sell me. It doesn't know me and offers something that I will transact upon. Are you working on personalization of offers in your?
Yes, we're working with Pros. You saw where we started this morning. I think all of you saw it. My perspective is that if you don't offer something that is really targeted and focused towards an individual, you actually cause problems rather than you cause excitement with the customer. And the key idea is then to have AI running over the information you have, data you have, and trying to come up with what you could offer a client. I think in the beginning it will be probably based on a group of people or segment that you're able to identify from your data you have. But I think finally it will go down, as he said, to his kid and his two kids. It has to be really personalized down to the individual kid or person in the future. But I think it's really challenging to do the individual personalization at the moment. And I think the first step will be for a group of people, etc. So I play golf a lot, and I hope that I get a good golf offer off and on from the guys.
Sure.
And I think by using artificial intelligence, it has to come with new analytics. I mean, just to measure not what the robot is doing, but also so you can learn, so the teams can learn. And that comes with a different challenge, because you might need to change not only reshaping your organization, but reshaping or having people that can understand data, right? So the pricing problem today is more complex. It's 360, 3-dimensional, 4-dimensional. There is so many things that the pricing and the analyst, they need to take decision on, because it's upsell, it's sell up, it's bundle, it's unbundle. So it became like a huge endeavor for them to make sense of things. So that's why artificial intelligence with analytics that can produce better results.
Interesting, not necessarily a cool answer, but the airlines have spent decades maximizing network schedules, revenue management, inventory buckets to open and close based on demand, and in effect personalizing that, right? If an airline put a schedule out and said a 3 p.m. departure and no one buys it, they're going to pull it back and they're not going to put it in front of you anymore, right? I think there's a near-term opportunity to take some of those practices and knowledge that I think we tend to push aside because they're old school, if you will, right? And ignore them and pull them into this digital age and this offer management side of things and say, hey, what can I do before I get to the aspirational state of AI and machine learning and all that heavy lifting it requires to say, that 3 p.m. flight in the Q fare I never sold, you'd be all over your pricing analyst. What are you doing wrong, right? You can apply some of those same things with merchandising and those products too.
Well, if we can switch topics just a little bit and talk about distribution. There's a lot going on in the world of distribution, NDC, new channels. The look-to-book ratios that used to be 100, 200 to 1 are now 10,000 to 1 or more in some cases. Are you seeing the same sort of things, and how is that changing the way you look at distribution and technology for distribution?
So we don't see 10,000 to 1, we see 30,000 to 1. So
30,000.
without a single booking coming from it at the end. So that's a little bit of a challenge. I think the people who are doing distribution, the GDSs, have to be more worried about this than others, because I believe there will be alternate technology. As Timo said, the old way of doing things will change, just like the whole industry is changing, and I believe they have to be as much worried or prepared to take on the future as we have. So I believe, yes, we are looking at it. We have, as I said, I've taken it over a couple of months ago. We have studying the overall distribution aspects, the alternate channels. We've gone to the first level with NDC a couple of months ago, and we are looking at alternative channels, direct distribution tools, etc. And of course, I've had a few meetings with my colleagues in the GDS as well the last 2 days. And I think to go to what Tomi said is basically, I believe that we have to decide in the coming days whether we continue also in, I think the GDSs slowly have a reversal of fortune, and we basically now are more in control of our distribution. But the bottom line is that I would like to take back my control of what I want to distribute to whom I want to distribute it, right? That's the end goal as far as I'm concerned. And so at the moment, I'm constrained by too many things like, this content agreements, etc. And I guess something's going to break there.
Right.
Yeah, when I moved to airline industry 10 years ago from the automation industry, I was amazed. Not because airline industry was, I don't know if it was, but I was told today that the first real e-commerce industry, 28 classes. I mean, how do you?
It depends on the alphabet that you.
Exactly, and what kind of an industry or a company gives their inventory and the ownership away? That really bothered me. That how is this even possible? And I guess it's a full circle now gone around. I started to learn first that okay, this is the reason, and it's cost efficient. Someone is managing. It's really complex, and it's impossible for us to do it, and all the excuses. But I guess today, like Richard said, it's time to look again and think that who is really owning the inventory? Exactly. Is it the airline or someone else?
So just listening to what Elton was saying, it almost feels like we work in the same company.
We do.
But no, we don't. I mean, just because of the issues and the challenges. And at Aeromexico, yes, we are investing in NDC. Obviously, NDC, it's a technology. It's a way to communicate, which is different. But we need to be very careful in the organization so it doesn't sound like it's an IT project. It's obviously, it's more than this. It's just not changing from one technology to the other, but what we want from that everyone's understand that it's not just about the fare and the seat, there is content, there is so many other aspects that makes the offer to the customer. And that is a big challenge in itself.
Just to add to that too, the query volume, look to book, to me is symptomatic of that content, and then also I think Richard talked about earlier, the trust factor in that content, right? That ultimately is how you get that under control and drive those volumes back in line, right? There's a tactical issue of scaling up, which is hardware, and quite frankly, throwing money at it. That's not going to be sustainable over the long haul, right? If you have direct channel customers coming to you through your e-commerce site with a 10,000 to 1 look to book, you would say, what are we doing wrong? And you would take action. The fact that it's through distribution channels tends to get kind of pushed aside and ignored, but ultimately you're going to have to face that challenge at some point.
And of course, the right answer to your question is that buy the Pros Fast Charge cash product. That's what you were trying to get out from us,
Well,
right?
you know, we've been thinking about distribution for a long time. And when we first built RTDP, it's with Swiss as the launch customer, the entire idea was to take the O&D evaluation out of the PSS so that we didn't know what the future of distribution would be. Whatever it may be, the airline would have control over the logic and intelligence of responding to a request. And I think time has proven that was a very good approach. So it's interesting to think about where we've come and how the whole distribution landscape is sort of unwinding slowly, piece by piece. And I guess the logical next question is, where do you see it 10 years from now or 20 years from now? I mean, would we have the same sort of distribution frameworks? Are we now talking about more of an e-commerce system that's the underpinning of an airline? I mean, how do you think it will look in the future?
Well, I believe whatever is least cumbersome to deliver your product out very easily, very quickly, I think time to market will be very important. And I think if you need to use big data to connect, to make proper offers to people, whether you use AI or you do it manually or whatever, you need different systems. The present systems are just not capable of handling it in all the channels. Right. So I think that, as I said earlier, the channels that are not capable of handling the issue will go. My perspective is also that you have to measure the revenue to cost ratio rather than just the cost in the future. So if you have another channel which is able to do the same very efficiently, with a good price in relation to the revenue you get, I think you can push a lot of the lower inventory through these channels. So I think this will be also with the more expensive channels, you will tend to block out or take out the low classes or low fares that you have, and maybe offer them to selective channels. And this is what I see in the future. But I definitely don't see that that we continue to distribute the way we are, especially with some channels.
So selectively orchestrating
Absolutely.
how the product is distributed.
And if I have my control of my content, and I can decide which channel I want to use very efficiently, right? For what kind of product that I want to distribute.
I think the revenue management today that does optimization, forecast, it does a good job. It serves to where we are today. But I think 10 years from now, I believe that artificial intelligence will grow and slowly we'll get into these algorithms. And I see that will be more in a way to help the analyst with make sense of 100 million availability requests, right, per day. So it's a lot, right? So a human being can't do this, and I think we need help, and that help from the artificial intelligence and these new algorithms that will be delivering more revenue for the airlines.
Yeah, 10 years from now, that's quite a far. So if we talk about that, I'm sure you all saw what happened last week. Was it Tuesday with Google announced also the Google Assistant, the new generation of it. That was amazing. I mean, my son is the same kid. is playing with Siri and also Alexa at home. I'm not so comfortable with those tools yet, but they will be. In 10 years, I'm sure they want to do what I would like to do now, is have my personal assistant who might tell that book my trip, thank you, and the machine does it for me.
And I think because this, let's call it the post-millennial generation, the way they're raised, it's interacting with the external world different. So that's what we need to learn from that, right? They don't think about just writing anymore. It's just swiping. And so that changes. I believe, I'm not an expert, but I think it changes the brain, the way you think, right? And that those are the customers of the future, right? In 10 years maybe.
And the fact is that the legacy systems today, they don't support any of that.
Yeah.
That's what
Immediate and content-rich, dynamic offering and shopping. Not at all.
That distribution landscape has been getting more and more fragmented for the past 20 years, right? 10 more years in the future. I think we all have to expect there's going to be a natural sort of expansion of that, and then it's going to come back together at some point. For airlines and the industry as a whole, the key is to get control of your key asset there, which is your content, right? Your product that you're putting on your shelf, right? Absolutely. That's what every other good retailer does. That's what Amazon does. That's what Apple does. That's what everybody does well, is they control what their product is on the shelf, at what price, and at what time. That's how you control the market, right? That's the key, and you see some of that transformation happening right now. We're calling it digital. The customer experience is part of it, but that customer experience is really about the data, the information, how you present it, and when you present it. And that's going to be the key to me over the next decade for distribution.
And I think the ones who can't deliver or can't deliver to the customer will basically have a big challenge in the future. That's I agree with what Aaron's saying.
Right. We've been talking about personalization a little bit. What is the appetite for truly personalizing a offer that's charging more or less for one person than another? And how do you think that will evolve over time? Because I know airlines are very cautious about that. I mean, I saw 3 apology ads on TV over the weekend. Facebook, Uber, and Wells Fargo. All their CEOs were on TV apologizing for things their company did. So
they're not an airline.
No, but airlines are very conscious about this because they're worried about dynamic pricing and personalization and being put in that sort of situation. How do you think this will play out?
Well, I think it'll play out with the fact that, as I said earlier, about offering the correct content to a person. I hear all the time, and I believe it's absolutely true, that people are actually willing to pay a little bit more to get what they want, right? And if you are in control of your content and you are delivering the content at the correct time to somebody and what somebody wants, rather than buying generically, I believe that that will be positive. So I don't personally believe that the prices will go down, or that is dependent on the competition and the capacity and more things like that. But I believe the capability to deliver the correct content, that is also for me competition in the future. If one airline is not able to deliver the content as well, then that airline probably will have a problem compared to another one or another competitor who can deliver better content to the customers.
Right.
I think personalization touches, because it's so personal, it touches the human aspect of the offer, right? So if you start, I know exactly, I understand what you say. Maybe that is an ethical problem that you want to avoid for the airlines in the future, that some of the big companies are having to come publicly and apologize and say, I'm doing this shouldn't be done. But once the offer satisfies the customer need, I don't think the airlines will be having that kind of problem in the future. Hopefully, I don't know. But that's what
A lot of that depends on how you tackle the problem, right? You talked earlier, Surain, about your mileage offer, right?
Right.
It's about value. And the fact is today, a lot of things are being priced under value of what someone's willing to pay for it.
Absolutely.
And that service, as you've unbundled it, starts to become harder to convey what that value is, and you're slowly chipping away at building that back up. Personalization is a way to make that happen, right? If you try to do it personalization on each individual component, you're just going to get the same problem you had when you unbundled everything, as opposed to starting to put the right value proposition, which is a combination of things, whether it be bags or an extra legroom seat or priority boarding with the ticket. Then that starts to become harder for customers to complain about because they're focused on the outcome. They're focused on the experience, which is ultimately what airlines are competing on, right? What sort of aircraft do you fly? Where do you fly to? And how good is that, right?
Interesting. And we were just talking about AI as well. We've invested quite a bit of time, effort into in the R&D area with AI. We're seeing some very fascinating results. For example, one area is machine learning, artificial intelligence for creating demand forecast influences. And this would seemingly be a very complex problem that we all grapple with. And the AI algorithms are coming up with demand influences within 4% of what a user does today. And now we have to decide if the 4% is better or worse than what the user does today. And it's also very good at predicting what a user would do and predicting anomalous sort of influences and overrides that are happening. And we're going to see this across the board, things changing with new AI algorithms. What are your thoughts about this? And how does that change what the analyst does in the future?
So I agree, and I think sometimes we have a finite number of analysts doing demand, and there's a limit to what they can do too. So you can, I don't believe, so it's 4% compared to what an analyst does. You have to also think about whether what the analyst is doing is right or wrong. So then you can come to whatever conclusion you need. So I believe just based on the volumes and based on the overall transactions, I think it might be better to use AI after it's calibrated and things like that, rather than use a human being to do something like that.
If it's 4%, that's an excellent result.
Yeah.
I think, because we can use that resource for better integrating, creating the offers, and do other things that are more creative. And in the last 3 years, we changed our organization healthily, and not firing people or anything. We just moved people around. So we have 80% of our staff in revenue management, new people with new way of thinking, new graduates, and they actually, this is what they want, right? So if the machine has something to offer on the 4% level, I think it's an excellent result.
Yeah, with the artificial intelligence, of course, we all have heard the scenarios where people are not needed anymore. We can just take vacations all the time.
Then you can fly more.
What I've seen so far, whenever there is a new technology, you actually have to reorganize. You have to find the right people to teach the new technology. And one very easy example is chatbots. Quite many of you have probably tried the chatbots already.
Yep.
They are like little babies. They can't talk, they can't walk, they can't do anything, not before you teach them. And the more you teach, the better they come. And eventually they can take up some of the tasks, little by little. But it's baby steps.
It's a process, I guess.
So they wanted us to leave a few minutes at the end, last 10 minutes, to take questions and answers from the panel. Would anyone like to kick it off and ask any questions? We have some online questions. Nope. Okay. Any questions? Yes. Please. Okay, the question, thank you. The question was, how does the future revenue management organization change and adapt to these topics we're talking about?
So we had a very interesting discussion about the same topic. So we had maybe a slight different one, but it was who's going to implement offer management and who's going to control it. And these bad marketing guys are going to make some really crazy offers, so we got to control them and things like that. So I think personally that as far as the price is concerned, the revenue management team will still control the price of our product. I think the marketing people will at the same time look to see what they can do with partners together with our offer. And so I believe we will work much, much closer with them to deliver these offers to the customer. I'm not so sure we really need to change organizations to do that, but I believe that it will be more collaborative working because, as I said, it's also various products of the customer experience will be across all the companies. So I don't think you can look at one aspect of the sales part alone. So it'll be a generic thing. I don't believe that there will be just one great organization doing everything. I still believe that you need people to control the inventory on the flights and to look at the demand from a O&D perspective or from a leg perspective, and to accept the best prices and things like that. So I think it's a little bit separated. So I think the pricing part will be more together with the offer management part, but there will still be the core of inventory management or steering, as we call it, as it is today.
I think every time that technology evolved, obviously processes needs to change, and therefore an organization, obviously, right? I would say that I think in the future, some parts of RM, I believe there's still some demand analysts, flight analysts, but some parts of RM, which is closer to pricing, needs to understand a little bit more of retail. What is marketing? What is merchandising? So you can create these offers. So I think that as airlines, we need to think about what are the opportunities there. Go ahead.
Just to add to that too, right? A lot of demand management, for example, today happens based on completed transactions, right? In part because you can't keep up with all of that demand and all of the data that's coming in. AI and other things start to take those mundane tasks off your plate, and you can repurpose those really intelligent, analytical, detail-oriented people to look at what's happening when we put an offer in front of someone, not just once they completed it, and how do we repeat that again, right? So you start to get a shift in the organization and people to really unlock their full potential and complement the skills that exist in the organization.
Yeah, from the business point of view, we were talking actually in one table today about this, that what is then, like someone said, that right now the revenue is managed mainly by the ticket, not the total revenue, including the ancillaries or whatever is being unbundled from the ticket. But what about the whole life cycle of the customer when you take into account everything from the acquisition, conversion, retention, when you take the loyalty team into account? How do they value the customer who might only buy the cheapest tickets because he's a student and he can afford, but he's probably going to be the business traveler? So how do we handle that kind of a revenue management in the long run?
Right. No, that's a very good point. Like casinos today look at the overall value of the individual, and then the hotel room might be free based on what your other history is with them. Do you see airlines potentially moving in that direction?
I think what my colleague said here, the customer, I call it the customer lifetime value of a customer. So it's not only about one trip, but it's about the whole lifetime value. The customer, it's ignored today in revenue management. And with the personalization and with the data and with the tools, you will be able to understand with what happened after the trip, but you can also influence the customer before trips and before buying, and influence the buying behavior. So my perspective is, yes, this will be a very important part of valuation that will have to be considered in revenue management as well. How you do it, we have to find out. But the point is that there has to be a thread across the whole company to be able to agree how this is evaluated and added to the equation.
And that's what I think we as an industry need to think about doing it right. So we don't have our CEOs in the future having to go public and say something apologetic.
Right.
You know, so you need to know that customer for the value, not only of that offer on that moment, but how much value it aggregates to you.
Great. Well, I think we're out of time. If you have more questions.
Yes, we have one question from the audience.
Can we make time for it? Okay.
Does the role of OTAs and meta search engines grow or shrink in a world of personalization, dynamic pricing, and NDC and direct distribution?
So we went into branded fairs, and we had a huge challenge because behind the OTAs are the GDSs, right? And so we had a huge challenge to actually even show our product, which was there, to the customers to allow them to buy it. And it took months before they could update their systems to, and they had to all do it individually. So there was no generic thing. And this is exactly what I said earlier. I think if they continue in this way, then of course we have to challenge whether they need to have our content, or we will send them content and they will be able to sell one part of the pie but not the rest. So I think it's something that they have to think about more and about their future as well about it.
Great. Well, Elton, Tomi, Aaron, Edgar, thank you so much. If you have more questions, you can catch them afterwards. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.